Hello all you run and gun loving cosmonauts, as always I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Wells, which is an indie action side-scrolling game developed and published by Tower Up Studios. Set in a steampunk universe under a totalitarian regime, you play the role of Wells, a new hero with access to a variety of weaponry, and you have to face down the onslaught of enemies and various mechanical beasts that of course always exist in a steampunk universe. Which brings me to my first gripe about the game, the story, because I can't tell you what it's about. I genuinely could not tell you, because it sets you off saying, there's this bad guy in this regime and he's, leader of the known world and he's pissed off the wrong hero. And that's basically the entire story in a nutshell. You don't get any more exposition than that. There's no further story development in the game whatsoever. It's basically the bad guy pisses off the good guy, ensue random levels of killing and destruction, and that's the only thing that it ever gives you. It doesn't tell you who Wells is, it doesn't tell you who the bad guy is, what he's done. It gives you no real in-depth look into this steampunk universe, and instead, from what I can ascertain, the story is basically a cheap way of giving you a reason to go through this game and shoot things in a steampunk universe, because the story itself, there's no meat to it, it doesn't actually mean anything, and that's all there is to it. So let's get on to the gameplay. Now, we recently reviewed a really pretty damn good side-scrolling shooter in the form of Rise and Shine, that's mechanics were very, very good, very, very tight, very fluid. Wells, on the other hand, is not. And there's some really interesting, fun ideas in Wells that I really wish, honest to God wish, that they had been fleshed out more. For example, Wells' first weapon, there's a series of weapons that you unlock as you go through, each doing different various things, but the first weapon you have is just his basic steampunk pistol. Now, the bullets ricochet off everything, and you can pull off some really cool kills with ricocheting bullets, but it's never ever expanded upon or built into the core gameplay design or built into the level design. And it's something that I really think that the developers missed a trick with here, because it would have been really fun to have puzzles and enemies to defeat whereby you had to pull off really fancy trick shots where you had to ricochet the bullet several times up, a flight of stairs or something like that. And it could have been a really exciting, fun core game mechanic, whereas in actuality and in the execution of this game mechanic in reality, it is basically a nice little feature that's tacked on but is never really done anything with. There's never really any exposition to it, and that's really a big shame, because it could have been a really good key feature and a key selling point of the core gameplay. Instead, what you have is a series of weapons that all do different things, all are fun within their own right, all have different cooldowns and unlimited ammo, but for me, there are two key, major, big problems with Wells in regards to its core gameplay. First is the fact that Wells himself is an absolute bullet sponge. I barely died, maybe once or twice on the boss battles, and at the end of every level there's a boss battle. I maybe died once or twice on a boss battle. That was it for the entire game. The entire game on my first playthrough, and that was absolutely shocking, and it was a real shame. Wells is a bullet sponge, enemies don't damage nearly enough, the difficulty of the game is so easy to the point where the game overall becomes very, very boring and very, very repetitive, because there's no absolute challenge. There's no challenge whatsoever. I can literally go stand in front of an enemy and just take hit after hit after hit, and I won't even have to fire back for several seconds because my health is that bloody large. On top of this, you have a movement system that, while the controls work fairly well for the most part, movement on screen visually is a little bit janky, and it doesn't work quite as you would like. The response time isn't as tight as I would come to expect from a very good 2D side-scrolling shooter, and ultimately it just lets itself down. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination in terms of its controls and movement, but it's just not quite up to par from what I would see from something that I could heartily recommend to people. I have to say that one of the good marks about Wells was the level design, and with the 3D graphics it really did help give you the sense of a lot more depth than a normal side scroller would have, in the sense that especially on one of the levels which was solely on the rooftops, you had a situation where you were battling a gunship and you had to hide while the cannons fired, and then you would use one of your weapons to shoot at a cannon on the rooftop which would then attack the gunship. And then on top of that you had zip wires that would go 3D, so you would go behind and bring you forward and bring you behind again, and it gave a nice little sense of depth to the entire world, which I quite enjoyed. That being said, I don't think the core mechanics of the game for most of the levels were really implemented into the level design, and I think they could have been a lot better in that regard. At the end of each level, like I mentioned, is a boss fight. Most of the bosses are really straightforward and easy. There is one which is the spider one, which throws poison gas at you, which I did struggle with for a moment or two, but other than that it's fairly straight sailing, as is most of the game. The game is also fairly short, and for $10 for 5-6 levels you are going to struggle to really get your money's worth, especially with the fact that there is very little difficulty overall to the game. If the game was challenging and had a little bit better movement, less clunky animation, and overall improved polish and visuals, I think that I would certainly recommend it. However, as the game stands now, while it is certainly not a bad game in any stretch of the imagination, it's just mediocre. It's average at best, and I think for the majority of people who are looking for a action side-scrolling game where it's all about shooting, similar to Rise and Shine, what you want is a premium experience for the most part, and Wells is not going to give you that. If you're desperate to pick it up, it's not a terrible game, but like I said, it's average at best. And that is my review of Wells. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, make sure to share it on social media, and as always, I will see you next time.